All Quiet on the Western Front. A young German soldier's terrifying experiences and distress on the Western Front during World War I. That's a very brief synopsis from IMDb. However, that's really all you need to know about this really harrowing Netflix film. So if I've got to describe my experience with this movie in a sentence, I would say that this movie is very dark, grim, grisly, and really ugly, but my word, is it very captivating and a very enthralling experience. Now, I don't typically do this during my film reviews, but I do want to warn you before you go into this movie. This is a German movie with German dialogue, so if you start watching Netflix and you hear English words dubbed over German dialogue, don't fret, that's pretty normal, and that's how I watched this movie. It didn't impact my experience at all. I was still able to enjoy the movie in full effect. And additionally, I'm going to keep my pros and my cons a little bit more brief than usual because I want to provide more general thoughts about this movie later on. So let me start off with what I really enjoyed about this movie. This has to be one of the most captivating movies I've seen this year. I don't know if it's the obviously young age of all these soldiers that are being sent into World War I. I don't know if it's the camera work, the cinematography. I don't know if it's the grisly images, but this movie really kept my attention throughout the really long runtime that it had. This movie clocks in at 2 hours 28 minutes, which I think is a pretty long, but when you're in the middle of it, I just didn't really mind it so much that it was so long because everything was just so eye-popping and eye-catching. And it's even in the quiet and mundane moments in this film, whether you're in peril, whether you're just watching soldiers bond with each other in downtime, this movie just has a way of holding your attention, really. And for a movie to do that for so long is very difficult to do, so I've got to give props to All Quiet on the Western Front for doing that. And additionally, this movie is very consistent in the fact that it shows you the ugly side of war pretty much at all times. There's very, very few moments or words of dialogue that can really just stray away from that, and sometimes they try to crack a joke or two, but it's very subtle to the point where if you blink, you're gonna miss it. And it's not to say I like this movie for being serious all the time, absolutely not, but this movie knew exactly what it was going for, and it really executed on it pretty well. So let me shift over what I didn't like about this movie. I think the movie does kind of meander throughout its runtime. There's some relationships, some side plots that they do kind of go through that feel a little pointless and a little out of left field. Every time we cut away from Paul and his fellow soldiers to some of these relationships, you just kind of start asking yourself, why am I here? And without this specific relationship or these characters that I'm talking about, I think this movie's runtime could have been cut down by 15 to 20 minutes, and I think this movie would have been much better for it. Because 2 hours 30 minutes, although this movie is very captivating and holds your attention, that does start to feel kind of long after a while. Like, this movie could have reached a logical conclusion at about 1 hour 45 minutes in, but it just kind of keeps going for another half hour. And candidly, it just didn't really need to. Okay, so as promised, I kind of want to jump into my general thoughts about this movie. This is a really solid Netflix movie, and if you're really into the war genre, I think you're going to appreciate it. I've never seen a film that really explores the German soldier side of World War I, and I found that aspect really fascinating. And although the main meat of this movie is around Paul and his captivating story as a really young soldier being sent to World War I and how awful all of it is, it does a really good job of balancing out with the history to tell you kind of what's going on and what Germany was facing at the end of World War I and why they might have been hesitant to a ceasefire or agreeing to an armistice. That additional context, I think, was really pivotal for the movie and really added an extra layer that the movie benefited from. Could you have told the story about this movie without it? Absolutely. Do I think it was necessary and added a bit of more context, a bit of more clarity to this film? Absolutely. And at first, I was really thrown off by the fact that I didn't know that this was a German-made film, and it took me a second to adjust to the English audio dubbing over the German dialogue. But like I said, it didn't really detract from my experience at all, and I was still able to enjoy the movie in full effect. So if you guys are hesitant about watching this movie for that reason, don't be, because it's still very digestible. And I've got to say, the lead in this movie, Paul, who's played by Felix Kammerer, he does a really great job of pretty much taking on that lead role of this film, because he is in just about every single second of it. The peril, the darkness, the grief, the dread that he feels about his day-to-day and going to war for 2+ years from when he's 17 to when he's however old he is by the end of the movie. The movie really showcases that well, and Felix Kammerer really brings out that peril really, really well. And I think that's the most dark and grueling part of this movie, is the fact that it's told through the eyes of a group of 17-year-olds who are going off to war. They're going into this thinking that, oh, we're manly men, we're gonna prove our pride for our country, we're gonna go in, this is gonna be great. And they find out very quickly that war is an awful thing. And I think that's really clever by the movie to really captivate your attention early, because it's got this juxtaposition of innocence of boys who very quickly turn into very terrified men. The things that you see Paul and his friends go through are very unpleasant, very in your face, and the movie just doesn't shy away from any darkness, which I think is necessary for what the movie was going for anyway. And I will say, I did end up checking the time at one point throughout this movie. At about the 1 hour 45 minute mark, I was like, okay, how much longer does this movie have? So like I said earlier, the 2 hour 30 minute runtime does start to get felt a little bit. You feel like the movie's just about to reach its logical conclusion, but then it just kind of keeps going. And I think if the movie would just cut down the runtime, maybe cut out some character relationships, it could have benefited from that. One other side note I want to touch upon, Daniel Bruhl is in this movie, which I thought was a really interesting additive to it. He plays one of the characters who is negotiating the armistice with I can't recall the other side of the World War I group, but he's negotiating the armistice on behalf of Germany in this movie. And I thought he brought a real sense of authenticity that this movie needed, and it was really, really felt from my experience. So friends, on the whole, I'm definitely going to recommend that you watch this movie, especially if you're into the war genre. You won't be disappointed. This movie's pretty captivating. In the end, I'm gonna have to give All Quiet on the Western Front a 7 out of 10. I thought it was a really solid movie and definitely worth watching. It's on Netflix right now if you want to give it a shot. Friends, thank you so much for watching another movie review. If you like this or found it helpful, I'd be honored if you consider clicking the like button, clicking subscribe, clicking these end cards, or the links down in the description below for your viewing pleasure. Once again, I've been Bryce, and until next time, have a great day.